Welcome everyone to the webinar. Over the next hour, we'll be speaking to you about the role of social media in patient advocacy and how best to utilize this in your organization. My name is Mario Theodorou. I'm a digital director at Engine MHP. We're an agency who specialize in all forms of communications.
I'm Darika, I'm a digital director. I also work at MHP with Mario. I worked for about 16 years in communications, 14 years specialising in digital, and I always joke and say that's pre-Facebook.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Willard. I'm Vice President of Public and Professional Education at the COPD Foundation in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off this session very briefly. Instead of showing the usual sort of stats and facts about maybe why you should be using social media, we thought it would be useful to give an update on how social has changed due to the big event this year, COVID. And just a note here that this session has been organised and funded by AstraZeneca. Okay, so there's been three trends that research has shown have changed social a bit this year. And the first one is that, it won't be a surprise to you, more people have been using social media. So consumption has leapt huge amounts this year while people spend a lot more time looking for things to do. Looking at that behaviour, people are starting to see social media more as entertainment content. So we've seen some activities that consumers previously didn't do, like watching video, suddenly become more prominent in things that people are doing. And while that has been a bit of a COVID effect, what research shows is that a lot of people are saying, I started doing this during lockdown, for example, but now I like watching video on social and I plan to be doing more after lockdown. And the final change that we've seen in social this year is that social's returned a bit more to what it was originally set up to do. So it's a lot more about using social for connection and conversation. So less about posting the picture about what you're eating and more about using social to catch up with friends and family. So what we were going to look at today is just some of the trends as well that might be really helpful in the work that you're doing. And the first trend we thought we'd talk to you about is influencer marketing. So there's been a huge trend in influencer marketing for a while, and that again has jumped due to the COVID effect this year. So more people are now following influencers online. Again, it's about using social media as an entertainment channel. And the types of content that they are consuming has changed a bit. So for example, more people are following influencers in the health and well-being space. That's everything from fitness influencers through to people talking about issues around mental health. And the other thing as well is that in terms of what content people like watching from influencers, it's really practical. It's not always entertainment content. It's very much about seeing a product or service in action or wanting how-to tutorials. When we were putting together this session, we thought it would be useful to see, does influencer marketing relate to COPD space? And you might be surprised to find that even on a platform that's seen as, uber new, very young and hip, like TikTok, we can already see some COPD influencers emerging on this platform. And it's a real mix. It's a mix between healthcare professionals who are wanting to share information and advice on COPD, and also patients, so people who are sharing more about their journey with the condition. So definitely something to start thinking about is what influencers do you already work with? So maybe you have mainstream personalities that you can start to use on their social platforms, or you could look for people that perhaps have a big online following and could help spread your message. Second trend is, of course, we have seen a lot of things shifting from the real world to virtual. I saw a lot, I don't know if other people did as well, but I saw a lot of this challenge going online, which was the stair climb challenge. I think it was originally inspired by a climbing trip that was delayed. And so due to COVID, people decided to climb the same amount of meters in their house. And I think that I've seen a lot of like patient advocacy groups really switch to this way of doing fundraising activities. That's everything from shifting marathons from like big group events to things where people can slowly log miles to joining together in groups. And we've even seen organisations like British Lung Foundation here. They've set up a dedicated section on their page now that talks about fundraising in virtual instead of real world events. And one of the examples that they talk about here is they talk about people who want to do a fundraising. So previously someone might have done like a Shave My Head event and they might have done it down in their local pub. Now they're saying, well, that's something you can do at home, and think about live streaming, which is the third trend that we wanted to mention to you. I think we've all been exposed in some way or other to more video online platforms. So whether it's something like this one, or whether it's Zoom or Skype that you use. And I think what a lot of people overlook or forget about is that the social media platforms have a lot of live streaming capability built into them. So Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, which is the Periscope platform, sometimes people don't realize that's live streaming to Twitter, is all there available for you to think about. Maybe it's about meetup groups, maybe it's about lobbying, maybe it's about patient support networks, and that can all be leveraged within a social media environment, which comes with the added benefit that you've already got an engaged, signed up audience, and as soon as you go live, they get that content pushed to them. So that's some of the trends that are happening in social media this year that you might like to start thinking about. But I'm going to hand over to Maria, who's going to talk to you about how to run your social media day to day.
Thank you, Darika. So I'm just going to talk about how you run social media day to day in your organisations, and probably some of the questions that you've asked when trying to think about how to run social media internally and do it effectively. The first thing to say is that the role of a social media manager is a very busy and extremely varied role. It can include setting strategy, creating and curating content, monitoring channels, responding to posts and content, trying to be timely and relevant, building campaigns and promotions. So as you can see from the slide, it seems like quite a daunting mix. But having said that, it's a very valuable role, and actually if you get it right and you follow a certain path, a certain strategy, it's quite easy and it will be very rewarding. The questions you need to ask yourself really is, within the business, how important is it and at what level should it be managed? Is it by an intern, by the founder, by a patient advocate? You need to assign someone to that role. Is there a clear outline of what they manage, how it's measured? Do they have the skills to deliver it? Consider creating a brand social media guidelines to help them in that role. And the other bit really that's of importance is to make sure that you figure out the essential daily and weekly tasks rather than being bombarded by all of the activity that you see in front of you. With that in mind, I'm going to go through the kind of strategy that you would need to implement to make that role work on a day-to-day basis. That will start with insights into the channels, into the role, into your audiences, planning, how you start to set out a social media strategy, posting, which would be the kinds of tools and the kinds of best practices you will follow in terms of posting your content, engaging, which would be engaging with your audiences, and how you measure and optimize your activity. So it won't surprise you to hear that the social media landscape is extremely saturated with content. I'm sure that some of these stats that you see on the screen reflect some of your day-to-day activity. People start watching, reading and scrolling from the minute they wake up. In the first 60 seconds of their day, they are absolutely bombarded with content from the major channels and the major social media platforms. Research suggests that the average person is exposed to 5,000 plus brand messages per day, so you can just get a feel for the type of saturation that you're having to compete with. So how do you cut through all of that noise? We know that modern social media audiences are highly sophisticated consumers of content, so it's key to understand their behaviours in order to garner their interest and drive engagement with your content. Here's some of the things that we know about a modern sophisticated digital audience. They have extremely high expectations, particularly with content. So when thinking about, do we create a raft of content that's lo-fi, or do we actually put our budgets into stuff that's really high value? With, and I'd always say high value wins. They're hyper connected, they're part of a community and tribe and feel a sense of belonging. They're constantly researching information. They have the ability to make informed decisions about content. They like to share, they have very short attention spans, and they are influenced by peer reviews and key influencers, coming back to some of the stuff that Darren was talking around influencers. So we know that understanding behaviours will enable us to create content that is more likely to be engaged with and cut through the noise. Part of that behavioural analysis can be done through desk research, but mostly through monitoring tools. In this case, what we've done is we've had a look on Global Web Index around the types of healthcare content that users want to see, and you can see it listed out there by percentage. It's really insightful to be able to look at your sector and look at the type of content and the type of user behaviour, so we can start to glean those insights and create the type of content that we know has the best chance of resonating in this highly saturated market. Once we have our insights, we move into planning, and this SMART framework is a really good rule of thumb to help focus your social strategy. So by SMART, we mean be specific about your goals, be specific about what you want to achieve. It says there, instead of growing followers, think about the percentage or the size of audience that you're trying to grow on your social channels. Measurable, well, most of social does have analytics platforms. Everything is measurable to a granular level. So let's make sure that the things that we broadcast or post or put out are absolutely measurable, particularly against our objectives and insights. Achievable is really important, and there is this belief on social media, particularly, that if you post something, it should suddenly go viral and you're going to have 1 million views on your hands. It's not always the case, and actually, without some paid behind it, you have to think about the types of numbers that you want to grow, particularly in terms of members and followers. Realistic, time, money, resource. It's hard to benchmark against other businesses or other organizations. No two organizations' audiences are really truly the same, neither is their content. So benchmark against your own performance. And time bound, set some time to achieve this goal. And it doesn't matter specifically if you miss your own target, but you have something to aim for. There are a number of ways to look at this SMART framework and work around it, but actually, if you can just follow these really simple steps, you'll find that it helps. The other side of planning is understanding your channel mix. Now, this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, because most organizations create a piece of content and they just spread it across every single channel. All the channels have specific usages and individual abilities. Now, if you look at this list, you'll see that Facebook is to reach a broad audience. It has a huge ecosystem in comparison to something like Twitter, which is to engage with fans in real time on a one-to-one level. The idea here is that actually sometimes less is more, or fewer is better. So we talk about being smart about your channel mix, making sure that you're not just spreading your content so thinly across everything, and making sure that actually the quality of your content and the choices you make around channel mix are so important to make sure that you hit your objectives. Once we've gone through the planning phase and we've looked at our channel mix and chosen our channel mix, it's then about creating a great content calendar to be able to deliver our content in a organized way. Now, as you'll see, every social strategy is delivered via a content calendar, and this image lays out how you would take the days, the platforms, the messages, and put it into something that's coherent, it can be picked up and used and implemented. People always ask about the volume or cadence of posting. Our argument would be that there's no silver bullet for this. Consistency is much better than frequency. So if you post 3 times a day, post 3 times a day every day, rather than twice in a day and then 5 times the next day, and such and such. The problem with a frequency that moves around is that your audience never know what environment they're in and when to receive content. Likewise, we have analytics that tell us the best time of day. Again, there are some rules of thumb, but as you'll see in this slide, what we've done is we've looked at it specifically from a healthcare point of view, and you'll see that actually on the relevant platforms, some have the best time of day in the morning, early in the week. Others have it spread out throughout the middle of the week. A lot of these platforms enable you to look at this type of granular data, and there are additional platforms like Sprout Social and some of the posting platforms that allow you to look at this data in more detail and to access it. We would always advocate using social scheduling tools. They allow you to create or marry your calendar to a posting schedule that you can do without having to do it on a daily basis. You can load up that content and have it posted out, automated, and it also allows you to glean insight off the back of those tools. One thing I would say is that posting is one part of it, the other part is engaging. So once you've posted content you will be engaged with, the best way to understand the kind of impact you're having is to set up some sort of notification on these platforms that allows you to see who's tagging you, when people are talking about you, when people are commenting, and you'll be notified, and that will enable you to engage effectively with your audience once your calendar has been implemented. The other thing to note is when you post content, to have call to actions, to drive some sort of engagement tactics. And I've put 5 down here that will really help with your content to drive engagement. One is to ask questions. Audiences love to be asked questions and have something to respond to. The other thing is be emotive and invoke expression. Provide incentives. That could be content that is hot off the press. It could be, access to something virtual. Make offers, and lastly, deliver utility. People always like to, or users specifically, always like to see content that adds to their experience. We talked about scheduling tools. There are also engagement tools like TweetDeck and Hootsuite that enable you to have various strands of content from different platforms. You can see what's going on the social media platforms and then respond in real time. I would suggest you have a look at these. They're really, really useful and they help you with your posting and engagement strategy. And lastly, I'm just going to go into measurement. Now, measurement is a little bit of a hot potato. What we like to talk about here is the 3 R's, which are reach, resonance, and reaction. So reach, very simply, is did I reach the right number of people and the right type of people? And you can measure that simply through these metrics below: likes, fans, followers, posts, impressions. Resonance is a bit more about sentiment, which you can find on those platforms. And then reaction is, did I cause them to react or take an action anyway? And that's again in raw numbers like sales, mentions, comments, downloads, whichever is relevant for the post that you're putting out for your calendar. And lastly, which is a tiny bit more technical, is when you have something in flight and a piece of content has been posted, you can measure and optimize it. So before you post it, if you establish what the KPI is it purely about reach? Is it about sentiment and garnering interest? Is it about getting someone to do something? Define that process. So we're going to do it always, all the time, or campaign based. Benchmark against your own performance or key metrics. Launch the content, and then what you can do is you can quantify its impact through numbers and optimize again and repost. I know that was a whistle-stop tour, but that was quite a lot to get through in 10 minutes. I hope that's been helpful. I'm now going to hand back to Darika to talk you through some top tips for developing a social media campaign.
Thanks, Mario. I'm going to talk about planning a social media campaign, and that is because campaign planning can be slightly different than the day-to-day planning that Mario just talked you through. And I'll show you how. This is a useful model that we use for a lot of our clients, everything from profits, patient groups, through to big FTSE 100 companies, and it's called the Hero Hub Hygiene model, or sometimes referred to as the Hero Hub Health model. And what we typically find is that most people have a good idea and a good rhythm in doing the first 2, their hygiene, their daily activities, and their hub, their monthly content. And that's everything from your daily engagements through to your regularly scheduled content that's going out on the content calendar. But the most successful brands or organizations on social media also have strands to their content planning, which is around hero content. So hero content is like 1 to 2 times a year having a large scale moment. An obvious one that's coming up soon is, of course, World COPD Day. And the point for thinking about planning for a campaign or a moment just like that is because if you think about how social media works, most of your feeds and your content that you share on social media is seen by people who are already aware of you and already follow you. What you want to do is have some big hero moments where you can drive awareness and reach new audiences. So what do we mean by a hero or a campaign moment? We've pulled some examples that we really like. This is one from an organization called Lightful, which is Reclaim Social. And this is a hashtag that's used to share positive stories on social media. So it's in recognition that there's a lot of negative stories on social media and a lot of cyberbullying and negativity and issues like that. So they've created a day, an awareness day, Reclaim Social, And they have made that a moment for lots and lots of different types of organisations, and particularly a lot of charities and patient groups engaged with this one day of the year. They've created a bunch of assets, like you can see here, that people can customise and share on that day, so they show that they're part of that social moment. Here's an example of the MS Society in the UK, who have taken something like MS Awareness Week. Now, they had already planned to host a reception and a debate in the Scottish Parliament during the week, but they also thought about, well, how is this going to play out as a hero campaign moment on social? So they thought really carefully around what were some of the outtakes going to be, and thinking about creating really high quality, rich media assets as an outtake from there. And you can see an example here. And finally, this is an example from Amnesty International. So really similar to what we saw with the MS Society. So thinking about a real world event like MS Awareness Week, and thinking about, well, how can we amplify it on social? This is one of my favorite campaigns. So it was a stunt in London, and it was 24 hours, and it was different families coming and sitting in this glass box, and it was called a portrait of family life. And it was all to get people to engage with the idea of how important it is for families to be together, and to get them to vote for the Refugee Family Reunion Bill. This was a stunt in and of itself that wouldn't have been seen by a huge amount of people. Did definitely get some media coverage, but they managed to massively expand the reach by turning this into a social media campaign and live streaming it to Facebook. I was talking to you earlier today about how easy it is to live stream to social media. This meant that they managed to reach 100,000 viewers, more than 10,000 of which then clicked through to a website and wrote letters to their MP to ask them to support this bill when it came up for vote. So that's some hero campaigns. But what do we do in terms of how do you plan it? What are the steps that you go through in planning it? What's similar to what Mari said, you need to think about what your objective is going to be. It's really important to think upfront about what do you want to achieve, because that's going to impact everything from the social media goal that you decide to set through to which tactics. So for example, if the objective of the campaign is purely fundraising, then on social media you're going to be looked to how can we use social media to drive people to a location to donate. Likewise, like we saw with the Amnesty campaign, is that if it's a policy ask, you're going to want to use social media to take audiences somewhere where they can take a tangible action. So think really carefully. We've put some typical objectives that patient organisations might find here, but you might have something that's unique to your own organisation, and use that as your starting point. So once you've set your objective, as I've said, that will lead you into thinking what typical tactics might be. In terms of coming up with some ideas for what those tactics could be, this is another model that we use with our clients. It's called the PESO model. PESO is an acronym for paid, earned, shared and owned. And it's visually represented like this as an overlapping Venn diagram to show that in social and digital, all of these areas quite frequently overlap and can impact each other. So for example, on the paid area, you might be thinking, well, we don't do any paid. Well, we would recommend to any client looking at using social media that they should be thinking about that as the owned content. What is the content that's going out on the owned social channels? Paid, so looking to promote or sponsor those posts to increase the reach. And also maybe what influencers you're using. So what earned or shared channels are there that you can be switching on and using across social. So thinking really broadly, you can work around a model like this and just brainstorm what are our paid activations, earned, shared and owned. We've done a mini version here of what World COPD might look like on the PESO model. So on the owned side, it might start with thinking about, okay, what do we need on our website? Do we have a dedicated landing page that we're sending people through to? On the shared aspect, it's like, what are we posting to our social profiles? Do we have key execs that might be, authoring a LinkedIn blog post? On the shared and earned side, do we have influencers? Do we have spokespeople? Are we trying to start a campaign where people are sharing their own stories and using a hashtag like we saw with the Reclaim Social campaign? So if you work your way around that PESO model, you can come up with ideas for what your tactics might be. Once you have set your objective, thought about how social is going to help you achieve that objective and created your tactics, then you will know what your relevant metrics need to be. Murray's already touched on some of the metrics that you can use around reach and resonance. I think the reason we want to talk about here the importance of setting your objective first is so many people say to us, well, which objectives matter? Should I be measuring followers? Should I be measuring reach or impressions? You need to pick the metric that relates to what it was that you were trying to achieve. So obviously, if you wanted to achieve a fundraising goal, you really want to look at seeing, what percentage of donations or traffic through to your donation site was generated by social. Likewise, that Amnesty International campaign that I talked about had a policy ask, and so, really what was measurable was how many people, A, were exposed to the content, and B, took action and wrote to their MP. How does this look in practice? Well, again, working with the Amnesty example, we've just broken this down into those areas. So the undeniable wonder of family life analysed based on this framework is, the objective was really clear. It wasn't about, raising the issue of refugees generally or that families were separated. It was very, very clearly because there was an upcoming vote happening around the Refugee Family Reunion Bill and they wanted people to engage. So what was the role of social here? Well, they came up with this, really amazing real world tactic or stunt that was very creative. And they realized that they could use social media to expand the reach of that activity, but also to help drive people to the Write to Your MP website and generate those letters. The tactics that they used, they're looking at the PACER model. The paid tactics was they boosted the live stream. So they had a live stream running from the Amnesty International Facebook page, which would have reached thousands of people, but they also put some money behind that to make sure that that live stream was boosted and reached people who perhaps weren't already followers of the Amnesty International page. And on the earned side, they thought a lot about how would people be sharing this content, and then that would amplify the reach of their campaign. And on owned, I mentioned that they had a huge Facebook following that they managed to leverage for this campaign. And then finally, what were the metrics that mattered? Yes, the reach for this was significant, so over 100,000, but ultimately the metrics that really mattered was click-through to the website, how many letters were generated, and ultimately the fact that the vote was successful when it came before Parliament a week later. That's it, a whistle-stop tour on campaign planning, and I'm now going to hand over to Kristen Willard from the COPD Foundation.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot from both of your presentations, and I'll be telling the group today about a Facebook Live event that we did at the COPD Foundation. Some of the best practices that we've learned over time from these types of events and lessons learned the hard way. So I'll share those with you now. Let's get started. So the event that I'll bring to you today sort of as the real world example was a Facebook Live event that we conducted in 2019. This was on NTM lung disease. Now, it was sponsored by an industry partner, but I want to say first and foremost that you don't have to have industry partner sponsorship in order to be successful at these types of events. This is something that you can do on your own if you're interested in doing so. It was moderated by a pulmonary nurse, and we had a pulmonologist who also was a speaker, and of course, a person with NTM lung disease. I'll talk more about that later, but this is something that's very important to us, is having that patient voice represented. And following the event, the video was posted for a 2-week period. I'll tell you more about what we do with that. But the tip I want to give you for this particular slide, or on this particular slide, is that it's a little known fact that Facebook Live events can be live or recorded. And so in this situation, because there were so many people that wanted to review, there were edits that needed to be made, we opted to record it, do the editing, have the review process happen, and then to post it as a live event in quotes later. And now I'll tell you more about our recruitment and promotion. So the foundation likes to put out repeated messaging about our events, and we think that this is something that we've learned that has made us successful for these types of events through social media. So what kinds of things did we do? We put out a press release that announced the events. We published 9 social media posts that through Facebook as well as our Twitter accounts. I will say that a tip here is that Facebook has been most successful for us. Even if it was not a Facebook Live event, we found the most return on investment through Facebook. And we also included postings in our newsletters, reaching approximately 30,000 people. It is not necessary that you reach 30,000 individuals through your promotion. You know, your community may be 30 people, it may be 300,000. The key really is the engagement level, I think, that you get with that group of your members. So let's move on and talk about how we also engage with our partners to extend our reach for this particular event. And that's another way to amplify your message. So for this event, NTMIR, who is our partner in the NTM lung disease space, was generous and tweeted about our event, shared information on their website. They also put information in their e-newsletter, a blurb there, because that's a way that they reach people very directly. So that was very successful for us. Another thing that we did was engage with the project funder about sharing information on the Facebook Live events. You might be hesitant to do this if you do have a funder, but remember that they are invested in the success of your event. Do not be hesitant to ask them to help you with promotion. If they aren't reaching patients, they will oftentimes reach healthcare professionals, and then those healthcare professionals can engage with people impacted with the disease of interest in your case. So in addition to that, on this next slide, we also increased our participation through Facebook ad buys. And again, don't let this put you off because it's related to budget. These ads target specific users and encourage viewers to engage and to watch your video. So there's an example here in the image that you can see. We did 2 Facebook ads for this particular event, and you'll see that we had, through these 2 ads, 5,000 video views. So that's a quarter of our views for this video came through these 2 ads. So again, that was quite successful for us. Again, don't be overwhelmed if you have a small budget. Facebook, I think the minimum that you need to place ads would be $5. If you have $500,000, that's great. We did not, but you don't need to. Really, Facebook works with you based upon your goals and your organization and your particular event to see what is the best fit for you and your work. All right, and then I'll talk briefly just about the overall impact. So we had set a goal of 20,000 total video views for our particular event. We exceeded this with 21,000 views, so we were very pleased about that. Again, as I told you, a quarter of those came through paid ad views. We were also pleased with our level of engagement because that's really where the interaction happens, right? It's people commenting, it's them sharing it with their communities, with their friends, them liking the comments or, excuse me, liking the content or caring about it with the new care button that they have on Facebook. So this is really the substance of it, and we were quite pleased with this outcome. I'll tell you more about goals in a little bit too. So now on this next slide, what I'll do is share with you what we've learned over time, our best practices for the Facebook Live events, as well as other events that you conduct through social media. I think really first and foremost, it is essential to incorporate the patient voice. So we really view ourselves as an amplification of the speaker voice as patient advocacy organizations. You don't just want to have an impacted individual involved as a speaker for your event, but you really want to involve them in the entire planning process, as well as the reporting process back where you get these types of lessons learned. So that's something that's really important to attend to. You'll hear a lot about messaging, I think, from all of us. Here are a couple of things. As Mario said before, be sure to include a call to action. You have a really engaged group of individuals right now, so let them know what you want them to do next. Visit our website, sign up for a newsletter. They're activated, so you can capitalize on that while you have their attention. I think it's really essential. We have found it very helpful. Repeat information, especially information about specifics, the time of the event. Here's where you access the event, etc. So you want people to have as much information as possible when they receive a message from you, because they don't see every message you're sending out. A little more about that material review process. If you just go back one, a little bit more about the material review process. So what you want to do is involve and inform your partners and key stakeholders really early in the review process. So these could be sponsors, these could be your speakers, your funders. What you want to do is inform them early in the process so that everyone can review, say, your goals, your scripts, etc. So there's really very little to no disruption in your event schedule, and everyone's satisfied with what the outcome will be, with what the project outcomes will be. And last on this slide, we think it's fun to share a simple teaser video for promotion, for pre-event promotion on your Facebook page, just to urge your viewers to tune into the content. Again, don't be intimidated by this. This is something that can be recorded on your phone camera, on your computer screen, or you could do something more formal. We've also found, as you can see on this last bullet, that 4 to 6 weeks is a really good sweet spot of a window for promotion for your event. All right, and on this next slide, I think this is perhaps my favorite of all of the tips that we have learned under script development. Ask your community in advance what questions they might have on the topic, and then use those responses to shape your script. We think this is really rewarding for the people that we serve as a patient advocacy organization, to hear their questions answered and to also see themselves in the content that we are promoting and putting out for them. Next, under script development, keep the event focused and succinct so that people actually watch the entire thing. Now, I recognize that this is easier said than done. We all have a lot of great content that we want to put out, but what you'll want to do is, if your content does run too long, particularly for something like a Facebook Live, consider cutting it down into sections and then putting those out as different phases or different modules of a larger event as a series. Goals and metrics, again, you heard from my colleagues before. They've given you a great framework with the SMART goals framework. Be sure, no matter what framework you use, that you're all on the same page, that you define your metrics early in advance of all of the work that's being done. Don't wait until the end, because you need to know what success looks like for your particular event, and you want everyone to be happy with those outcomes and on the same page. This next one is fun for us too. So during the live event and 2 weeks after the event, we monitor the Facebook recording, and we respond to all comments in a timely fashion. It's always somebody from the foundation doing it under the the COPD Foundation handle, and oftentimes it's a respiratory therapist, so they can answer more complex questions or more clinical questions. We also let viewers know how their questions will be answered if we run out of time, which, as you can imagine, we always do. For events like our COVID events that are very popular and we get lots of questions, we tell them that we will post a Q&A via PDF to our website. You could also push this out via your other social media accounts. And lastly, a little bit about video posting. So something you may not know is that Facebook can do closed captioning for you. So this is something that you'll want to enable if you go that route on Facebook Live, because of course we want to make our videos as accessible to as many people as possible. And lastly, be sure to post on your Facebook event page and elsewhere when you are done with the event. Post the URL to the recording so that people know exactly where to go. Sometimes if you just give them general instructions, join us on our Facebook page, they have to Google it, etc., and you might lose people given that there's that extra step. So on this last slide, there is just my email address. If you are interested in contacting me with any tips that you have, we love to learn, or any comments. And on behalf of all of my fellow speakers today, we hope that you found this social media presentation helpful. And thank you so much for being here. Goodbye.